Good evening, viewers. This is our Tuesday night evening news from Maidan. Today the main topics would be still the situation in Crimea as it currently is unfolding. I think we probably want to have a look at the last night's UN Security Council meeting with Russia that started at 10 p.m. It was urgently called by Russia in order to discuss several questions. The Saturday's open meeting began with a 2-hour standoff over the procedure as Moscow fought the presence of cameras in Ukraine. They wanted for it to be conducted behind closed doors with no cameras, as well as with no Ukraine being present. According to a diplomat on the council, Russia was taken aback Saturday and wants to give its read on events, especially if things go south on the ground, as Russia has put it. The main message from Russia from the meeting, as we understand, was to deliver a speech claiming that Yanukovych is a legitimate president, and he actually asked Russia for military assistance. They have produced the copy of the original of the letter, which they claim was written by Yanukovych, and in a letter, Yanukovych supposedly addresses Russian president and asking him to help with the foreign troops to stabilize the situation in Ukraine, as they put it. It seems that Russia is trying to get out of going a long way to prove the legitimacy of its actions, even though as soon as the Russian statements appear, there is an immediate rebuttal, as they seem to be based on anything else but reality. The French ambassador Jared Arnaud said that the letter written by Yanukovych was a piece of paper handed to Yanukovych which got his signature. Asked if the letter was phony, Arnaud replied, "It's not a false letter, it's a false president," which obviously seems to be a consensus among the international community as well as in Ukraine, given that he has escaped the country and his own party renounced him. He's also being, at the moment, looked by the police force for the crimes against humanity. The US ambassador Samantha Power dismissed Moscow contention that it's intervened militarily in Crimea to protect the human rights of Russian civilians as baseless, insisting that there is no evidence of any threats against ethnic Russians in Ukraine. And today, Russia's been struggling to present any proof apart from the words of Vladimir Putin, who has claimed that a person was burned alive in Kiev, as well as someone else was tortured I think he said that it was one of the governors. However, until date we have only seen the torture from the Bakhmut Special Forces troops, and there is no evidence to the contrary that there has been even a single case of something like that on the side of protesters. Churkin, who was the ambassador to the UN from Russia, didn't rule out having OSCE monitors in Crimea, although he has mentioned that it should be discussed with the Russian government, which was the Ukrainian government, I'm sorry, which might mean that, it's either he's genuinely for the foreign observers mission there, or he has put the responsibility on the newly elected Crimean government to make this decision. Well, that still remains to be seen. Among the positive developments was this morning Putin's order for mobilized Russian troops to return to their bases until the 7th of March. However, that does not include the troops in Crimea. That order was given to the troops that were mobilized around the eastern mainland Ukrainian border. So hopefully we'll start seeing some withdrawal from those parts near the Ukrainian border. Today, the Ukrainian parliament reminded Putin that it actually is exclusive competence of the Ukrainian parliament to ask for a foreign troop assistance, and that neither president nor any other private or otherwise citizen can request the assistance of the international troops. And that was the declaration by Ukrainian parliament today, and we are eager to actually hear the reply of Vladimir Putin to that, as obviously he's trying to show that all the Russian actions are legitimate. It is quite puzzling to see whose support he's trying to win, but we'll keep an eye on the developments, and we'll look for further statement and try to analyze them as objectively as possible. Another lie by the Russian representative was rebutted today. The Russian ambassador Churkin has claimed that 25,000 Russian troops had the right to be in Crimea, and that those troops that are moving on the peninsula actually has the right to be there. However, we had a response to that comment as well. The Ukrainian parliament responded by saying that there is an agreement for 25,000 personnel of the Russian fleet to remain in Crimea. However, this is not the armed officers roaming freely the peninsula. There is an agreement for 1,900 armed Navy SEALs and armed personnel that can reside in Crimea, but they have to be within their quarters of where they're based. They do not have a right to roam freely with weapons on the Ukrainian territory. It seems that, we're hoping that Putin hasn't lost complete touch with reality, as Angela Merkel has put it after an hour-and-a-half conversation with him. According to White House sources, she declared that Putin seems to have been removed from reality and living in a different world, not understanding the real consequences of the actions. Also, Russian president finally broke silence after a few days that we didn't hear any opinions from him personally. However, he gave a press conference today in which he, among other statements, stated that Russian troops that Ukraine and the West are claiming that are in Crimea, that they are actually not Russian troops but Crimean self-defense units. New York Times has immediately picked up on the story and has asked the experts to analyze the footage taken in Crimea, and the footage clearly shows new Russian weaponry that armed people are being armed with. They're also showing new Russian military vehicles that has only been supplied to the Russian army, an equivalent of a US Hammer, which I think they call Tigers, and those vehicles has been seen and photographed repeatedly in Crimea, as well as their newly modified Russian rifles that also clearly can be seen in the pictures. So obviously there is a question where the Crimean self-defense troops would get such kind of weaponry, even when we've seen what's been happening on Maidan, American Special Forces advancing on peaceful protesters with weapons, and we couldn't have, as you've seen, that there were no weapons present on Maidan, but suddenly it seems like Crimea managed to mobilize themselves and miraculously get latest Russian weaponry. Putin has also stated in his speech that they are not going to invade Crimea, and it's only the people of Crimea who can decide on whether they want to be with Russia or whether they want to be with Ukraine, which obviously seems a fair question. If the Crimean people want to have a referendum on the question, there are legal procedures of how such a referendum can be called. There is no need to bring in the puppet government who's under the aim of the machine guns are trying to pass the phony laws. So there are procedures for that, and if the Crimean people see such a question, if they want to ask such a question, there is a procedure how they can gather enough signatures to conduct a referendum. Putin has, among other contradictory statements, Putin has also stated that he actually hasn't signed any documents with the current Ukrainian government, and that's why he is not going to honor the Budapest Treaty that was a guarantee for Ukraine against the foreign invasion when Ukraine gave up its nuclear weapons. However, in a later statement, Putin has said that they are expecting a payment of $2 billion for the Russian gas that, according to the contract they have signed with the Ukrainian government, which begs the question, how do they differentiate between the contracts that are honored and the contracts that are not? On the positive note, Putin has also mentioned in his speech that he gave an order for his government to start rebuilding the ties with the Ukrainian government, even though he says that he doesn't recognize it. We see this as a positive trend, as obviously we need to build relations with Russia. We want to work with it economically and we want to be good neighbors, but it has to be on the equal basis. Among the other news is that one of the largest Crimean TV broadcaster, Chernomorsky, stopped broadcasting last night, and the reason for that is yet unknown. It seems that there might have been an outside intervention, as there was no explanation for why they have went off air. An unbelievable act of bravery and courage on the part of Ukrainian women, as they've stood as a live shield between the Ukrainian army and the Russian troops last night in order to prevent the armed conflict. They were the wives and girlfriends of the troops of the Ukrainian army who currently serves in Crimea. There were several developments inside Russia. Their state channel, First State Channel, has cancelled the live presentation of Oscar ceremony. Instead, they've played the recording from which they've deleted the speech by actor Jared Leto, who was vocal in supporting Ukrainian protests. They have included his speech, however, they've cut the part about the Ukrainian protests out of it. As we have seen yesterday, the Russian stock exchange has suffered a slump, with 2 trillion Russian rubles wiped off the value of Russian business. That was a result of one-day standoff with Ukraine, and this amount is actually more than the Russians have spent on the Olympic Games, which was an equivalent of 15% of the total value of the Russian stock. According to the public opinion poll conducted just before the military conflict in Crimea, 73% of Russians actually are against of Russian involvement in Ukrainian matters. So we can see that there is no public support behind these actions, something that Putin is trying to quickly remedy by using propaganda on the state TV, something that everyone can easily check by looking on the internet what kind of footage are they supplying for the consumption inside the country. This is rather different than channel Russia Today, which is, while still not quite objective, they're trying to portray the news in a manner that is more acceptable to the West, as obviously it would have been very difficult for a Western person to swallow the kind of internal propaganda that Russians are feeding their own people. We have also, in the Welcome Development, we have also seen that the Russian Council responsible for the conflict with civil society, which is an organization founded within the presidential administration, they have voiced their concern and disapproval of the current actions that Russia is conducting, as well as Russian Human Rights Group has voiced their disappointment and concern about where the current situation is going. In terms of international relations, we have seen a lot of response from the countries in Europe and the United States who stopped the preparation for the G8 summit, to which Putin has replied, if they don't want to come, we are not forcing them to. There was also a support voiced for Ukraine from Australia, who said that they're cancelling all the government contracts with Russia until the situation is resolved. We have seen the support from Japan, who is very much dissatisfied with Ukrainian Russian actions, and China is currently watching from the far. The only statement they made is that they were hoping for a peaceful resolution and that violence is not acceptable. However, they have not judged Russia in their response to the crisis. In terms of internal situation in Ukraine, we're still having some protests, some pro-Russian rallies happening around the country. They're not numerous, mostly consisting of 100 or 200 people trying to wreak havoc, and there is actually now evidence that it's the same group. Among the people who are protesting, there is a consistent group of people who's been now seen in and documented. The footage is available on the internet. Who's been taking part in those rallies in different cities in Ukraine, like Odessa, Dnipropetrovsk, Kharkiv. Each city is really about a few hundred miles from each other, so looks like an action that's been planned, and same people are being brought to those actions in order to destabilize the situation. And in addition to that, the Ukrainian Election Committee has declared the referendum that's been called by the puppet government in Crimea illegal, saying that this was not the procedure according to which the referendum can be called, and that it has no legal basis underneath it. The Prime Minister Yatsenyuk has declared today, last night, that Ukraine is ready to fulfill all the requirements of the International Monetary Fund, which includes their very unpopular gas price rises for the general public, something that the Monetary Fund has been insisting on for a long time, as currently their gas prices for the general public are heavily subsidized by the state, and the requirement is to move it on their market basis, so there is no subsidies and people are paying for whatever uses what. So we will follow their reaction, as it's obviously not a popular move, and we expect some resentment on that front. I think this is all for tonight. Please be with us tomorrow at 8 o'clock with updates on the current situation. Thank you very much.